Well, welcome to this episode of Office Origami. My name is Kevin Keeler, and I am joined, as usual, by Tim Banting. And, today we're going to talk about one of the, I don't know, I'm going to call it a hidden gem, Tim. Does that sound okay? So one of the
I
hidden
think that
gems.
sounds perfect. Yep.
There you go. So one of the hidden gems in Office 365. Before we talk about the technology, I mean, we called this series Office Origami, and I didn't really know a lot about origami, but I was just doing a quick search ahead of this episode, and you can buy special paper, and then I was looking there's all kinds of books origami for cats, and you can get 20 different unique cat video or cat kind of folding patterns or whatever, and according to the book, cats are underrepresented in origami. So I'd say, see, you learned something new.
They're not underrepresented on the internet. There's so many cat videos.
But in paper folding. But
interesting.
And I think that's what we're trying to do is, you think maybe you got a plain piece of paper from your technology, but there's a lot more there. And certainly, I think Microsoft Forms is a great example of that. So let's go to a few slides and talk a little bit more about Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms, it's, as we've said, it's part of Office 365. It's pretty much included in every license, including the free license, but certainly, and there's some limitations on the free license, but any kind of business license. And it's been around for a good period of time. It was previewed it was announced, in the typical Microsoft fashion and every vendor fashion. It was announced in July of 2017, and then it was available in general preview in August 2017. If you remember one URL, it's forms.microsoft.com. That's the easiest way to get there. Or if you are logged into Office 365, you can go to the menu, which is kind of shown in item number 2 there. And the easiest way is you click on that little plus sign and you can create a new form. I guess with Circle 1, which I should have maybe talked about before, number 2, but this was, and I thought this was a pretty good way to describe it. Microsoft Forms, this is how Microsoft described it, the tagline, collect better data and make better decisions. And I think that's what we all aspire to do, I guess, in terms of collecting information. If we talk about creating a form, just really quickly, you can see, when you go and you do click on that plus sign and say create a new form, you give it a title, you can give it an informative description. So I created this working from home, I don't know, survey, I probably should have called it. You can have, any number of questions as long as it's less than 200-ish. And I say that because there's certain types of questions, like that Likert scale. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yep.
That has multiple statements, so each of those count as a question or so. And a while ago, the limit was 100, but just like all things Microsoft, I mean, things keep changing. So now you can have about 200. You can create a theme which has different colors and images, and that means you can put your own company's theme there. And then you can have multiple sections, including some branching. So that's like, if a person answers this, you go ask them some additional questions. You can include image and video questions, which is pretty cool. It supports multiple languages, like virtually every language. It's a little bit complicated, like in settings, you pick, multilingual. I mean, all the prompts can be in that language, but then you have to kind of, the best thing to do is just do a search and figure out how to create multilingual Microsoft Forms. But the key thing that we want to communicate, this is part of this series, is what you can do. You can create that. They can be shared internally or externally. So maybe easier to share internally, but you can also send links, which should work. Although, Tim, you tried an example earlier today, and I don't know if it's user error, but it didn't really work.
It may well be. I don't know what it was, but it didn't work. But I do know that external participants are great. I use it in my signature block just to gauge how our company's doing and give us feedback. So we have a permanent, survey out there, and
Okay.
our clients click on it and tell us how they're doing. So there's some really fantastic pre-made stuff out there that looks at things like net promotion score net promoter score.
Yes.
And you can make it as easy or as complex as you like. So it's a very versatile application and service.
You can see on the screen there are, the different choices, like you can add, when you add the questions, the different types of questions, and one of them is the net promoter score. So yeah, I thought that was brilliant how you include the link and your signature. And I know that the different product groups at Microsoft, when they're, things are in preview or early trial, like TAP, um, they use Microsoft Forms to collect all the feedback from all us external people who may be trying out some of the new stuff. And you can have up to 400 forms. So there is a limit. Like if you're a survey junkie and every day of the year you're creating a survey, you can have up to 400 active forms. So that's a little bit kind of from an overview perspective. Um, but why don't I turn over to you, Tim, and like let's talk a little bit about some of the other details and, as you say, the accoutrements.
Yes, well, I think what I was trying to do there was show, well, a link to multiple language support on Forms, but
Perfect.
I'm glad you pronounced it and not me. Yeah, I mean, Forms keeps growing in terms of its versatility and its function and features. I know that, if you're a huge marketing organization, maybe you'll bump up against that 400 form limit, and you might want to use something else like SurveyMonkey or one of the very many surveys that are out there. But I think at the departmental level, it's really useful. Things like pushing surveys and quizzes out through Teams, for example, checking in with people to see how they're doing on a weekly basis. There's a lot of capabilities that are built into the product and allow you to integrate. But one of the ones I do like, because it just visually it's very nice from an impact perspective, is the way in which you can ask a question and that Forms will use AI and use some insights there to sort of look at key phrases from a response and then build this really nice word cloud. And when you hover over it, you can see how many people have mentioned that sort of thing. So in this example here, it's you're trying to gauge feedback on an event, and people will say, it looks like in this case it was a good event or it's a great event. So it's really great visually to capture that, and lots of people think very visually. So this is one of the nice features that has recently been added.
Yeah, no, that looks great. So okay, and I mentioned this before, but why don't you go into some detail in terms of the different options and how you can share a form?
Oh, there's so many. There's nice links that can be automatically shortened. The QR codes is a very nice option as well. So you can have that on printed material, or in some cases, I guess you could have it presented up on stage, and you can have people just use their mobile phone and do a form without having to do that sort of thing. There's a great application out there called Menti, which is well worth exploring, but you have to go to a web page and type in a join code to be able to sort of give feedback. But perhaps one way in which you could circumvent the need for that is just by scanning a QR code and then filling out a form as you're going. So there's lots of different options there. You can share a link, you can email a link, you can embed a link, you can get a QR code, you can share with people inside organizations, outside organizations. It really is a very versatile capability.
Yeah, and I think, and the one bullet I don't think you mentioned is, if you don't want everybody to be able to respond inside your organization, and I think that this doesn't work if it's external, but internal, you can, be very cliquey and just share it with a small group of people, right?
That's right. You can invite people individually. The other thing that you can do is you can have an anonymous form. So you don't have to capture everyone's names, address, emails, or what have you. It can be anonymous. So that's a very useful feature if you want to gauge someone's open and honest feedback without naming and shaming them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I know there's some, a bunch of form settings. You talked about some of them, but maybe, let's take the audience through a few more of these.
Yep. So as I said, there's various things there. You can make sure that you have very specific people. We mentioned that previously. So in the settings there, in box number 2, you can have specific people respond, anyone respond, specific people in an organization. You can have start dates, end dates. You can have it ongoing. You can get a receipt of responses. So when I get someone that's responded to my email signature block in terms of a survey, I then get notification that someone's responded, which is great. I can quickly go and see whether or not something we've done has made an impact or something. So there's some really versatile settings there. And as you previously said, in box number 1 here, when you look at settings, that multilingual support is there, so you can have different language support within your form, which is really useful.
Yeah, and I found this a little bit confusing. Like, so the settings, like you got to go under the dot 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 and then the settings, but it's kind of duplicating some of the stuff that's under the share. And specifically for multilingual, if this is something that you're interested in, like you pick a language, but then when you go back to designing it, you got to kind of click on it again, and then that's where you can change, like in your questions, you can, translate that. That's not automatic. You have to do manual translation. You can translate the questions. So, and some of these things, like if you're interested in it, they're interesting, but like shuffling the questions, there's different kind of limitations on that. But I think to your point, Tim, in the typical Microsoft fashion, they keep adding a whole bunch of things. And one of the things I didn't mention, but I wanted to, is at that URL that I mentioned at the beginning, forms.microsoft.com, there's a whole bunch of training videos and a lot of great information that covers all of these different features in detail. But one of the things I found interesting as well is like the blog. I mean, it really goes back to 2017. So you can really, if you're interested, you can kind of follow the evolution of the features that they're adding. I mean, obviously the recent ones are maybe more relevant, but I went back right to the beginning just to kind of see the pace, and they keep adding and making it better and better over time. So
Yeah, there's a number of other good things. Like the progress bar is really good, and also it also estimates how long a survey will take you to fill in, which is really
right.
good because no one wants to fill in. They don't want to waste 25 minutes of their life filling in a survey. So it really helps you to sort of get an appreciation of whether or not the survey's too long or whether or not it's snappy and you're going to get more respondents. But there's some really nice features like that.
Yeah, I know that's a great point. And obviously, so you set up your survey, create the questions, you got a lot of things, you set the settings, all that kind of thing. But ultimately, the whole purpose of this is that you hopefully get responses. And I think to your point, I mean, one of the things that I thought was pretty cool is, and you get, you can go to this kind of in real time, right? So in this case, there was 4 responses, and on average it took 10 seconds, which because I created a very short kind of survey. But like if that becomes 10 minutes or 25 minutes, maybe that's something that's a little too long. So you can see, how long actual people are taking. Um, and then I looked this up because this changed as well. So it's like if you do a Google search, you can find wrong information. I guess the internet is filled with misinformation. But now you can do like up to 50,000 responses. And number 2, like with that dot dot dot, you can get a link to a summary page. So that's a page that you can send perhaps to the respondents and say, or to other people in your organization. It's kind of similar to this page here, but it doesn't let them like see individual detail or any of that kind of information. And then you can print it, or there's like a scary option where you can delete all the responses. One of the actual suggestions for Microsoft is if you have a license that only allows 200 responses, the free license. And I thought this was quite helpful. They didn't say, well, pay for a license. They said, well, one of the things you can do is just collect 200, export it to Excel, which is the option under number 2, and then collect more responses, right? And then just kind of amalgamate those together. Um, Form seems to generate these graphs automatically, which I think is fantastic. I recently did a
Yeah.
survey with SurveyMonkey, um, which in hindsight, when we were preparing for this episode, I feel like that was a bad decision because it was like several $100s that I paid for. I probably could have done it in Forms. In SurveyMonkey, you can choose the graph style, which is both a curse and a blessing. Like I found Forms did a pretty good job of picking that. And then on each question, the more details, it'll show you the individual responses. And, to your point, Tim, if it's an anonymous survey, then it just says anonymous, anonymous, anonymous. If it's not, then then it'll show the specific people if it was something that, of a nature of collecting information where you wanted to follow up. And then you talked a little bit more, so I think you're more familiar with, but like some questions have that little insights logo, and I'm not really sure. There's some criteria, but that's where then you click on that, and that's where you got that word cloud, right? So
That's right. Yeah, it's full of little surprises, lots of little insight buttons for you to play with, one of which is that word cloud. And I think it's only going to get better over time. So it uses AI to automatically group together particular phrases, does some sentiment analysis or looks at, you know, whatever it does its magic. And you have these delightful little insight buttons, and all of a sudden it presents it in a different view or a different way, or collates information so you can get better insights into the data that's all there. It's really quite, as you say, it's a hidden gem. It's one of those things that very few people use. It can be used in Teams. It can be used freestanding. You can add it in Outlook and various different areas through the Microsoft 365 Office 365 suite. It's really great. Oh, there we go.
no, because you're talking
Great
about
segue.
these few more things. So as you said, our intent here is not take you through all the, gory details because then it would be a 2 hour kind of video. But I think, yeah, you can add Microsoft Forms powers of polls that you can create in Outlook. Now, poll in Outlook, as far as I've ever seen, it can only be one question. So it's powered by Forms, but it's one question. But but in Teams, you basically, as number two shows, you say, you can add a tab, you pick Forms, which is circled there as the application. And that really gives you the full power of Microsoft Forms directly inside of Teams, which means you can, put it in channels. Um, you can also include it in Teams meetings, but that's relatively convoluted. So I didn't want to kind of we didn't want to share the details, but you can do it. And, the other thing you can do is insert it in PowerPoint or Excel, but I think that has limited value. So I'm mentioning you can do it. I think it has value if you're a teacher in terms of inserting it in PowerPoint. Those are all the examples are in the education setting. Um, and lastly, you can use Power BI to analyze the results. You certainly can export it. Which it means, you export it to Excel and then you point Power BI to Excel, and then you can control all the graphs and what they look like and what have you. So, and then because it is part of the Microsoft Office suite, the giant bundle of things that you know and don't know about, you can use things like the Power Automate, flow you create a form and then you can have actions triggered by the form. I don't know, Tim, you seem to kind of use some of these things. Have you had an opportunity to kind of create a form with triggers associated with it, or?
I haven't, but I mean, I can think of some really good use cases where, if, for example, in Dynamics CRM, you get a case raised into Dynamics, and on closure, you could automatically send out a Net Promoter Score or some sort of form out to get some sort of customer survey data back.
Right.
I mean, that's huge. I do like the Teams integration is really good. I mean, you do say it's convoluted, but to be able to create a number of quizzes or a number of forms or polls ahead of time, push it out when you're in a meeting, or even in the chat session, you can call up a very quick poll. How's everyone doing? Yes, no. sorry, okay or not okay, you can post that within chat and it comes up really quickly. So there's some really powerful stuff there that unfortunately it's underestimated and undersold and not known about. But hopefully through Office Origami we'll get the word out there.
Thanks, Tim, for your insights,
Pleasure.
and thank you for watching.